Hello, and welcome to Drowsy Tales. Tonight, we are going to take a gentle journey into a story. Not a story of sharp edges or loud noises, but one of soft, autumnal colours, of quiet whispers, and of a place held gently in the arms of time. We are going to visit a small valley, a hollow nestled along the shores of a great river place that the old Dutch settlers called Sleepy Hollow. Perhaps you have heard its name before. Perhaps it conjures images of a galloping phantom of a frantic chase in the dark, but that is not the part of the story we are most interested in tonight. Our story are journeys about the place itself, about the feeling in the air, about the quiet lives of the people who called it home. We will treat the legend not as a frightful thing, but as a piece of folklore woven into the landscape as natural as the mist that rises from the river in the morning. So let us begin. Let your mind drift, let the story be a soft blanket for your thoughts. There is no need to hold on to any single word. Just let the sound of my voice be a gentle current guiding you toward a peaceful and deep sleep. Our journey starts not in the hollow itself, but with the great body of water that guards it, the Hudson River. But in this specific place, north of the island of Manhattan, the river seems to forget it is a river at all. It expands, growing wide and placid, stretching 3, sometimes even 5, miles across. The old Dutch sailors called this expansion the Tappan Zee, see the Dutch word for sea, and it does feel like an inland sea. On a calm day, its surface is a vast, grey-blue mirror, reflecting the sky in perfect, dreamlike stillness. The shores on either side are soft, rolling hills, often draped in a hazy, bluish veil that makes them seem distant and perhaps a little enchanted. The air here, according to the old histories, was different. Washington Irving, the man who would later write our tale, described it as having a drowsy, dreamy influence. He said it was as if the land itself was under a spell. Travellers who passed through this region would find their minds growing quiet, their pace slowing. They would become prone to daydreams, to seeing strange shapes in the clouds or hearing music in the rustle of the leaves. And it is in this slumberous atmosphere just east of the Tappan Zee that we find the entrance to our hollow. It is not a grand entrance. There is no signpost. It is simply a place where the rolling hills dip down into a long, secluded valley. A small river, or a brook, really, wins its way through the bottom of this valley. The Dutch called it the Pocantico. It is a gentle, meandering stream. Its waters are dark and clear, gurgling softly over smooth stones and fallen leaves. In the summer, its banks are thick with willows and wildflowers, but our story takes place in the autumn, so we must imagine it differently. Picture the trees that line this brook, the tall, elegant sycamores, their bark a patchwork of grey and white, like old parchment. Their leaves, in the autumn, are a pale, buttery yellow. They fall slowly, one by one, spinning in the cool air before landing silently on the water's surface, where they drift along like tiny, golden boats. The air in the hollow is still. It is sheltered by the surrounding hills from the stronger winds that might blow across the Tappan Zee. The silence here is profound. It is a quiet made up of tiny, gentle sounds, the whisper of the breeze in the high branches, the distant, rhythmic tap-tap-tapping of a woodpecker, the lazy drone of a late-season bee. This quiet, this stillness has a powerful effect on the imagination. It is a place where legends are born. A place where the line between the seen and the unseen becomes thin. The early inhabitants of this valley, the Dutch farmers and their families, were a people steeped in stories. They brought their old world beliefs with them, tales of goblins and ghosts from their homelands in the Netherlands and Germany. And in the deep, drowsy quiet of Sleepy Hollow, these old stories found fertile ground. They said the whole valley was bewitched, that a German doctor, a High German doctor as they called him, had put a spell on it in the early days of the settlement. Others said it was an old Native American chief, a powerful prophet of his tribe, who held his powwows here before the arrival of the white man. Whatever the cause, the effect was the same. The people of Sleepy Hollow were given to trances and visions. They saw strange sights. They heard unexplainable music. The entire region was filled with local tales, with haunted places, and with twilight superstitions. Stars would shoot across the sky more often here, meteors flared with more brilliance, and the nightmare, with her whole ninefold, seemed to make it a favourite scene of gambols. But of all the spirits and phantoms that were said to haunt this enchanted region, one was preeminent, one was the commander-in-chief of all the powers of the air. It was a figure seen by many a figure that gave the valley its most famous and enduring legend. It was the apparition of a man on horseback without a head. This, they said, was the ghost of a Hessian trooper, a soldier from one of the German principalities, hired by the British to fight in the Revolutionary War. His head, the story went, had been carried away by a cannonball in some nameless battle of that war, and now his spirit rode forth to the scene of the battle in nightly quest of his head. His haunts were not just in the valley, but in all the surrounding countryside, yet his favourite place to ride his headquarters, you might say, was the churchyard of the old Dutch church, which stood on a small hill not far from the Pocantico River. We will visit this church later. We will walk among its old, weathered gravestones, but for now, just picture it in your mind's eye. A simple wooden building, whitewashed and clean, with a small, unadorned bell tower. It is a place of peace, of quiet contemplation, and yet it is from here that the spectre is said to begin his nightly patrol. The country folk, the farmers and their wives, would see him. Sometimes he would be seen hurrying along in the gloom of winter, as if on the wings of the wind. Other times, at the darkest point of night, he would be seen galloping through the valley, a dark, hulking shape against the faint light of the stars. They called him the Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow. But for the people who lived there, the ones who told his story around their hearths on long winter evenings, he was more than just a frightening ghost. He was a part of their world, a landmark, a local celebrity, in a strange sort of way. His story was a thread in the tapestry of their lives, a piece of the drowsy, dreamlike magic that filled the very air they breathed. To truly understand this legend, to feel its gentle, sleepy power, we must first understand the world that gave it life. We must go back in time before the story of the horseman was ever written down and live for a while in this quiet, secluded hollow. We must understand the land, the people, and the slow, steady rhythm of their days. So let us go back to a time when the hollow was still a wild and untamed place. Before the first Dutch ships ever sailed up the great river, this land belonged to the Weckquaesgeek. They were a people of the Algonquin language family, related to the Lenape. The name of the river to them was not the Hudson. They called it the Mahicanituk, the river that flows both ways. They named it this for the way the tides of the Atlantic Ocean pushed salt water far upstream, causing the river's current to reverse its direction with the changing of the tides. They understood the river's rhythms intimately. They lived by them. Their world was a world of wood and water, of stone and soil. Imagine a hollow as they knew it. The forests were thicker then, ancient. Great oaks, chestnuts, and hickories formed a dense canopy overhead. The forest floor was a soft carpet of decaying leaves, damp and fragrant. The only paths were narrow trails, worn into the earth by the passing of moccasined feet over countless generations. The Weckquaesgeek lived in small villages, often situated near the banks of the Pocantico or the large river. Their homes were not permanent structures like the houses of the Europeans who would come later. They built wigwams, domed huts made from bent saplings and covered in sheets of bark or woven mats. They were warm in winter and cool in summer, and they could be dismantled and moved if the village decided to relocate. Life was ordered by the seasons. In the spring, they would plant their crops in small clearings they made in the forest. They planted the Three Sisters corn, beans, and squash all together in the same mound. The corn grew tall, providing a natural pole for the bean vines to climb. The broad leaves of the squash plants spread out over the ground, keeping the soil moist and preventing weeds from growing. It was an ingenious and sustainable system, born from centuries of observation and understanding of the land. Summer was a time of fishing and gathering. They would take their dugout canoes, carved from single, massive tulip trees, out onto the Tappan Zee to catch shad and sturgeon. They gathered wild berries, nuts, and medicinal plants from the forest. Autumn, the season of our story, was the time of harvest. The corn was dried and ground into meal. The squash and beans were stored for the winter. It was also the primary hunting season. The men would track deer and bear through the deep woods, their movements as quiet and patient as the forest itself. And winter was a time of stillness, of living off the stores of the autumn. It was a time for storytelling, The elders of the tribe would gather the children in the smoky warmth of the wigwam and pass down the history of their people, the legends of their gods, the stories of the clever trickster raccoon and the great spirit Manitou. They lived in a world that was alive with spirits. Every rock, every tree, every animal had a spirit. The world was not a collection of objects, but a community of beings. Imagine a Weckquaesgeek hunter, moving silently through the autumn woods of Sleepy Hollow. He is dressed in deerskin. His feet make no sound on the thick layer of fallen leaves. He is not just looking for a deer to kill. He is in conversation with the forest. He reads the meaning in a broken twig, in the cry of a blue jay, in the direction of the wind. He is a part of this landscape, not an intruder in it. His understanding of this place is as deep and as quiet as the hollow itself. This was the world that existed here for thousands of years, a world of slow rhythms, deep connection to the land, of stories whispered on the winter wind. And then the ships came. In the early Tsimshikinyds, the first Dutch traders arrived, sailing up the Mahikanituk. They were looking for furs, primarily beaver pelts, which were highly prized in Europe for making fashionable felt hats. At first, their interactions with the Weckquaesgeek were based on trade. The Dutch offered metal tools, colourful cloth, and glass beads in exchange for the furs that the natives were so skilled at trapping. But soon, the Dutch began to look at the land itself. They were farmers, and they saw in the fertile soil of the Hudson Valley a place to build a new life, a new Netherland. This is where our Sleepy Hollow begins to take the shape we know from the legend. The process was slow, and often fraught with misunderstanding and conflict. The very idea of owning land was foreign to the Weckquaesgeek. To them, the land was a shared resource, a living entity that could no more be owned than the air or the sky. The Dutch, with their fences and their property deeds, seemed strange and greedy. The central figure in the colonization of our hollow was a man named Frederick Phillips. He was an ambitious and clever man, a carpenter by trade who had come to the New World and risen to become one of the wealthiest men in the colony of New York. Starting in the 1670s, Phillips began to acquire vast tracts of land along the Hudson River, including the area that would become Sleepy. He consolidated his holdings into a huge estate, a manor, that stretched for miles. King William of England granted him a royal charter, making him the lord of Phillips Manor. Phillips was not a typical farmer. He was a businessman. His vision for the land was not one of small, independent farms, but of a large-scale agricultural enterprise, worked by tenant farmers who would pay him rent. At the mouth of the Pocantico River, right where it flowed into the Hudson, he built his headquarters. He constructed a large stone manor house, a fortress-like building that served as his home and his office, and next to it he built the economic engine of his entire estate, a grist mill. Let's pause here and picture this grist mill. It is a large, sturdy building made of local fieldstone. A great wooden water wheel, powered by the dammed-up waters of the Pocantico, turns slowly and steadily. Inside the mill, massive millstones, quarried from a special type of rock in France, grind the wheat and corn grown by the tenant farmers into flour. The sound of the mill was the heartbeat of the community, a constant low rumble, the slow, rhythmic creak of the water wheel, the grinding of the stones. For the Dutch farmers who settled here, the sound was a comfort. It was the sound of progress, of civilization, of a harvest being transformed into sustenance. These farmers, the tenants of Phillips Manor, were the first European inhabitants of Sleepy Hollow. They were families with names that would later appear in Washington Irving's story of Van Tassel, Van Ripper, Lint and Sea. They came from various parts of the Netherlands, bringing with them their language, their customs, and their Protestant faith. Their lives were hard, but simple. They built their own homes, usually small, one-room cottages of fieldstone, with steeply pitched roofs and wooden shutters. They cleared the land for their fields, pulling stumps and moving rocks by hand. Their days were governed by the sun and the seasons, just as the lives of the Weckquaesgeek had been. But their relationship to the land was different. They were here to tame it, to cultivate it, to make it productive in a way they understood. Let's imagine the inside of one of their cottages on an autumn evening. A fire burns in a large hearth, casting a warm, flickering light on the whitewashed plaster walls. The floor is made of wide, wooden planks, scrubbed clean. A simple wooden table and a few chairs are the main furniture. A large wooden chest holds the family's linens and clothing. From the heavy beams overhead hang dried herbs, strings of onions, and smoked meats. The air is filled with the smell of wood smoke and baking bread. The family gathers around the fire after a long day of work in the fields. The father mends a piece of leather harness. The mother spins wool into yarn on a spinning wheel, its whirring sound a soft counterpoint to the crackling of the fire. The children listen, their eyes wide in the firelight, as their grandmother tells them an old story from her childhood in the Netherlands. A story about Saint Nicholas, or perhaps a darker tale about a goblin that lives in the marshes. It is in these quiet, domestic moments that the seeds of the Headless Horseman legend were planted. These were a people who lived close to the earth, who knew the darkness of a moonless night, who heard strange sounds in the wind. Their imaginations were fertile ground for tales of the supernatural. The deep, silent woods that surrounded their small farms were full of shadows and mysteries. The stories they told were a way of making sense of the world, of giving a name to the things that frightened them, of filling the deep, drowsy quiet of their hollow with a sense of wonder and dread. And then, into this quiet, ordered, superstitious world, came the chaos of war. The American Revolution, which began in 1775, was not a distant affair for the people of Sleepy Hollow. Westchester County, where the hollow is located, became what was known as the neutral ground. It was a contested area, lying between the main British forces who occupied New York City to the south, and the Continental Army of the Americans, who were encamped further north. For nearly 8 years, this region was a lawless, dangerous place. It was ravaged by both armies and by gangs of bandits and marauders who took advantage of the chaos. Farmers had their crops and lives stolen. Homes were burned. It was a time of fear and uncertainty. And it was during this time that a new figure appeared in the landscape, the Hessian soldier. King George III of Great Britain, finding it difficult to recruit enough of his own subjects to fight the rebellious colonists, made deals with several German princes to hire their soldiers. The largest number of these German mercenaries came from the state of Hesse-Kassel. And so, all of these German soldiers, regardless of which state they came from, came to be known by the Americans as Hessians. To the American colonists, who were fighting for their liberty, these Hessians were terrifying figures. They were professional soldiers, known for their discipline and their ferocity in battle. They wore tall, brass-fronted caps and dark green or blue coats. They spoke a language that no one in the Hollow could understand. They seemed alien, almost demonic. Many battles and skirmishes were fought in and around Westchester County. One of the largest was the Battle of White Plains, which took place in October of 1776, just a few miles from Sleepy Hollow. It was a chaotic and brutal affair. The boom of cannon, the crackle of musket fire, the shouts of men in English, German, and the various dialects of the colonies, all of this echoed through the once peaceful hills and valleys. And it is from this battle, according to the legend, that our horseman was born. The story goes that among the Hessian troops was a tall, powerful trooper, an artilleryman perhaps, or a dragoon. In the heat of the battle, a stray cannonball, fired by an American gunner, found its mark. It struck the Hessian soldier in the neck, severing his head from his body. His comrades, so the tale continues, carried his headless body from the field. They buried it, with hurried and anonymous rites, in the graveyard of the old Dutch church in Sleepy Hollow. But his head was left behind on the battlefield, lost in the blood and the mud. And so, his ghost cannot rest. Driven by a supernatural impulse, he rises from his grave each night. He gets on his horse a great, black steed as spectral as himself and gallops forth in search of his missing head. He retraces his steps to the battlefield where he lost it, a frantic, nightly quest that will never be fulfilled. This is the story that the Dutch farmers began to tell. It took the real-world fear of the Hessian soldiers, the trauma of the war, and the old-world folklore of headless ghosts, and it wove them all together into a new, uniquely American legend. The Headless Horseman was a perfect ghost for this place. He was a foreign intruder, a symbol of the violence that had shattered the peace of their sleepy valley. His eternal, restless search was a reflection of the turmoil and uncertainty that the people themselves had endured. When Washington Irving came to write his story, decades after the war had ended, this legend was already a well-established piece of local lore. He did not invent the Headless Horseman. He simply collected the whispers he heard in the hollow, polished them with his own literary genius, and gave them to the world. And in doing so, he created two characters who would become inseparable from the legend of the schoolmaster, Ichabod Crane, and the local hero, Brombones. These two men represent the two sides of Sleepy Hollow's personality, the outsider and the insider, the intellectual and the physical, the superstitious and the pragmatic. Let us first consider the schoolmaster, Ichabod Crane. He was not from Sleepy Hollow. He was a native of Connecticut, an outsider. Irving describes him as tall and exceedingly lank, with narrow shoulders, long arms and legs, hands that dangled a mile out of his sleeves, and feet that might have served for shovels. His head was small and flat at top, with huge ears, large green glassy eyes, and a long snipe nose, so that it looked like a weathercock perched upon his spindle-neck to tell which way the wind blew. It is not a flattering portrait, but it is a memorable one. Ichabod is a comical figure, but we are not meant to dislike him. He is simply different. He came to Sleepy Hollow to be the village schoolmaster. His schoolhouse was a small, one-room building, rudely constructed of logs. In the winter, it was poorly heated and full of draughts. In the summer, it was hot and stuffy. Let's step inside this schoolhouse for a moment. Imagine the scent of old wood, chalk dust, and unwashed children. The benches are rough-hewn planks. The windows are small, with warped glass panes that distort the view of the world outside. On the small desk at the front of the room sits Ichabod's meagre collection of books, and the symbol of his authority a birch rod. His students were the children of the local farmers, a wild and unruly bunch. Ichabod was not a harsh master. He administered justice, Irving tells us, with discrimination rather than severity. He would lay the birch rod on the backs of the truly troublesome boys, but he would spare the weak. He understood that his position in the community depended on staying on good terms with the families of his pupils. And so he made himself useful. His position as schoolmaster was not a lucrative one. He was paid a very small salary. To make ends meet, he practiced a system known as boying round. This meant that he would live with the families of his students, staying for a week at a time at each farm. This made him a kind of wandering scholar, a travelling gazette of local gossip. He would carry news from one farm to another. He was welcomed by the housewives, for he was a man of letters, and he had a gentle and ingratiating way with him. He would help with the lighter chores on the farm, mending a fence or watering the horses. He would rock the cradle of the youngest child, and in the evenings he would earn his keep by sharing his knowledge and his stories. Ichabod had two great passions in life: of food and ghost stories. He was a man of enormous appetite. The sight of a well-laden table at one of the Dutch farmhouses was, to him, a vision of paradise. He loved the golden yellow pumpkins, the savoury sausages, the fat turkeys, and the sweet, spiced cakes that the Dutch housewives were so famous for baking. His other great passion was the supernatural. He was a firm believer in ghosts and goblins. His favourite book, which he had read until its pages were dog-eared and worn, was Cotton Mather's History of New England Witchcraft. He knew its grim tales by heart. And after a day of teaching, when he had finished his dinner at whichever farm he was staying, he would love to join the family around the fire and listen to their own local ghost stories. He would listen with a fearful pleasure to their tales of the woman in white who haunted the dark glen at Raven Rock, of the funeral trains they heard in the night, and, of course, of their famous spectre, the Headless Horseman. He would sit there in the warm, cosy farmhouse, with the firelight dancing on the faces of the storytellers, and he would absorb all of these wild and wonderful tales. But then he would have to walk home. His walk home, often late at night, would be a trial for his overactive imagination. He would have to walk through the dark woods, along the lonely paths of the hollow. Every rustle of the leaves, every hoot of an owl, would send a shiver of fear down his spine. The shadows of the trees would take on monstrous shapes. The wind sighing through the branches would sound like a mournful groan. He would see strange things in the darkness, things that were only products of his own mind, stoked by the ghost stories he had just heard. He would often sing psalm tunes to keep his spirits up, his nasal voice echoing strangely through the silent woods. He was, in essence, a man who was both fascinated and terrified by the supernatural world that the people of Sleepy Hollow took for granted. He was the perfect audience for their legends, the perfect victim for their pranks. And that brings us to his rival, the hero of the countryside, Abraham Van Brunt, more commonly known as Brom Bones. Brom was the polar opposite of Ichabod Crane. Where Ichabod was lank and awkward, Brom was broad-shouldered and muscular. He was, Irving tells us, a burly, roaring, roistering blade. He was famous for his skill in horsemanship, his physical strength, and his love of a good joke or a rough-and-tumble fight. He was the leader of a small gang of local farm boys, known as the Sleepy Hollow Boys. They would gallop through the countryside, playing pranks on their neighbours, stopping up chimneys, breaking windows at quilting frolics, but their mischief was always good-natured. Brom was more mischievous than malicious. The village people looked upon him with a mixture of awe, admiration, and affection. He was one of them. He was the embodiment of the rustic, untamed spirit of the hollow. His horse was as famous as he was, a powerful, black stallion named Daredevil. Brom and Daredevil were a perfect match. Both were full of mettle and mischief. No one but Brom could ride Daredevil, and when the two of them went galloping by, a dark streak of speed and power, the old Dutch wives would look up from their spinning wheels and say, "There goes Brom Bones and his Daredevil." Now, the conflict between these two very different men, the lanky schoolmaster and the brawny country hero, arose, as it so often does, over a woman. Her name was Katrina van Tassel. She was the only child of a wealthy Dutch farmer, Baltus van Tassel. She was a young woman of 18, plump as a partridge, rosy-cheeked, and universally known not only for her beauty, but for the vast inheritance she was expected to receive. Her father's farm was a picture of abundance, a large rambling farmhouse, with a low, projecting eave that formed a piazza along the front. A great elm tree grew beside it, shading it from the summer sun. The barns were overflowing with the treasures of the harvest. The fields were full of corn and wheat. The pastures were dotted with fat, contented cows. To Ichabod Crane, Katrina was more than just a beautiful young woman. She was the gateway to this world of wealth and comfort. He would stand and gaze at her father's farm, his imagination running wild. He didn't see fields of wheat. He saw ready-made bread. He didn't see cows. He saw cream and butter. He pictured himself as the master of this prosperous domain, with Katrina as his blooming bride. And so he set out to win her heart. He began to pay her regular visits at her father's farm, under the pretext of being her singing master. Ichabod had a pleasant, if somewhat reedy, singing voice, and he would teach Katrina the popular ballads of the day. This, of course, brought him into direct conflict with Brom Bones, for Brom had already singled out Katrina as the object of his own affections. He was her most favoured suitor, but Katrina, being a bit of a coquette, did not discourage the attentions of the strange and learned schoolmaster. She seemed to enjoy pitting the two men against each other. Brom, being a man of action rather than words, decided to deal with his rival in his own way. He and his gang of Sleepy Hollow boys began a campaign of practical jokes and harassment against Ichabod. They would smoke out his singing school by stopping up the chimney. They would break into the schoolhouse at night and turn everything topsy-turvy. They even trained a dog to whine and howl whenever Ichabod started to sing, much to the amusement of Katrina. But Ichabod was a resilient man. He persevered in his courtship, undeterred by the pranks of his rival. He was convinced that he was making progress, that Katrina favoured him. The feud between the schoolmaster and the country blade continued for some time, without either one gaining a clear advantage. And so the stage was set for the fateful night that would decide the matter once and for all. It was a fine autumn evening. The air was crisp and clear. The moon was full and bright. A messenger arrived at Ichabod's schoolhouse, bearing an invitation. He was invited to attend a quilting frolic, or a party, to be held that evening at the home of Mynheer van Tassel. Ichabod was overjoyed. He dismissed his students an hour early, his mind already racing with visions of the feast to come, and of a triumphant evening with Katrina. He went back to the farm where he was currently boarding and spent a long time on his toilet, preparing himself for the party. He brushed his old, black suit until it shone, he slicked down his hair, and he borrowed a horse for the evening's journey. The horse he borrowed belonged to the farmer he was staying with, a choleric old Dutchman named Hans van Ripper. It was a broken-down plough horse, gaunt and old. Its name was Gunpowder. It was a fitting steed for our lanky hero. And so Ichabod set off for the party. He rode Gunpowder slowly, his sharp elbows and knees sticking out at odd angles. He looked, Irving tells us, like the genius of famine descending upon the earth, or a scarecrow eloped from a cornfield. As he rode, he passed through the familiar landscapes of Sleepy Hollow, but they seemed different to him tonight, transformed by the magic of the autumn evening. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow over the woods. The sky was a brilliant orange and purple. He felt a sense of hope and anticipation. Tonight, he believed, would be the night he would secure his fortune. He arrived at the Van Tassel farm to find it already bustling with life. The house was brightly lit. Music and laughter spilled out into the cool night air. The plaza was filled with the farmers and their wives, and the young people of the neighbourhood, all dressed in their finest clothes. And there, in the midst of it all, was Brom Bones. He had arrived in style, as always, on his magnificent black horse, Daredevil, which was tied up outside with the other horses. Ichabod, for a moment, felt a pang of despair. How could he, on his sorry old nag Gunpowder, compete with such a dashing rival? But then he caught sight of Katrina, and his spirits rose again. She greeted him with a thou de besos, his head full of The party was a wonder to behold, especially for a man of Ichabod's appetite. The main room of the farmhouse was filled with a feast. There were dishes of savoury doughnuts, sweet crullers, and honey cakes. There were pies of apple, peach, and pumpkin. There were great platters of roasted chicken and smoked beef. Ichabod ate and ate, his heart expanding with every bite. He felt that his quest was already won. After the feast, the dancing began. An old, black musician was seated in a corner, playing lively tunes on his fiddle. Ichabod, despite his awkward appearance, was a surprisingly nimble dancer. He danced with Katrina, his feet clattering on the floor, his arms and legs flying about. He was the admiration of all the non-dancing members of the party. Brom Bones, meanwhile, sat brooding in a corner, his heart burning with love and jealousy as he watched his rival's success. When the dancing was over, the older folks gathered around the fire to tell stories, and as was always the case in Sleepy Hollow, the stories soon turned to ghosts and apparitions. They told of the woman in white, of the phantom ship, and of the many other spectres that haunted their valley. But the favourite topic, the one that held everyone's rapt attention, was the legend of the Headless Horseman. Brom Bones, ever the master of the dramatic tale, told the most thrilling story of all. He told them how, one night, on his way home from a neighbouring village, he had been overtaken by the horseman. Brom, on his horse Daredevil, had challenged the spectre to a race. They had galloped neck and neck through the dark woods, sparks flying from their horses' hoofs. They had raced all the way to the old church bridge, and there, just as Brom and Daredevil had crossed the bridge, the Headless Horseman had vanished in a flash of fire and brimstone. The story was met with a chorus of awe and admiration. Ichabod listened intently, his eyes wide. He, in turn, shared some tales from his beloved Cotton Mather about the witches of New England. And so the evening wore on, a perfect picture of rustic festivity, but eventually the party began to break up. The farmers and their families bundled themselves into their wagons and set off for home. Ichabod, however, lingered behind. He was determined to have a private conversation with Katrina, to make his formal proposal. He saw her for a few moments, alone. What happened in that brief meeting, no one knows for sure, but Ichabod came away from it looking crestfallen and dejected. Something had gone terribly wrong. Perhaps Katrina had rejected him. Perhaps she had been toying with him all along. Whatever the cause, Ichabod left the Van Tassel farm in a state of deep despair. His dreams of wealth and happiness had been shattered. He mounted his old horse, Gunpowder, and set off on his lonely journey home. The night was now dark. The moon had set, though the stars still shone brightly in the clear, cold sky. The world that had seemed so magical and promising just a few hours before now seemed menacing and sinister. Ichabod's mind, already agitated by his disappointment, began to fill with the ghost stories he had just heard. The darkness around him seemed to teem with unseen dangers. He rode through the landscapes that had become so familiar to him, but now they were transformed into places of terror. He passed the great, gnarled tulip tree where the British spy Major and Ray had been captured. It seemed to him like a giant, misshapen monster, its branches like enormous arms reaching out to grab him. He came to the spot where the woman in white was said to haunt, a small stream that crossed the road. He heard a rustling in the bushes. His heart leaped into his throat. He kicked Gunpowder, urging him to go faster, but it was only the wind. He tried to sing a psalm tune, to comfort himself, but his mouth was dry with fear. His voice trembled. Finally, he came to the most dreaded part of his journey. He approached the old Dutch church and the bridge that crossed the Pocantico River just beyond it. This was the very place where Brom Bones had his race with the Headless Horseman. The bridge was considered the boundary of the spectre's haunt. If he could just cross that bridge, he would be safe. The church stood on a small hill, its white walls ghostly in the starlight. The graveyard beside it was a dark, shadowy place. The trees around it were thick and ancient, their branches casting deep, black shadows across the road. As Ichabod rode past the church, he thought he saw something white hanging from one of the trees. He looked closer. It was just a place where the tree had been struck by lightning, and the white wood was exposed, but the sight unnerved him. He reached the bridge. It was a simple, wooden structure, spanning the dark, gurgling waters of the brook. He urged Gunpowder forward, wanting to cross it as quickly as possible. And then he saw it. In the deep shadow of the trees, on the other side of the bridge, a dark, hulking shape. It was large and misshapen. It did not move. Ichabod's fear turned to panic. He reined in his horse, his eyes fixed on the silent, shadowy figure. He tried to call out, but his tongue clove to the roof of his mouth. He waited, his heart pounding. The figure remained still. Perhaps it was just a shadow, he thought, a trick of the darkness. He gathered his courage and kicked Gunpowder again, trying to force him across the bridge. But the horse refused to move. It stood there, trembling, its ears pricked forward, its eyes also fixed on the dark shape. Ichabod kicked and kicked, but Gunpowder would not budge. He only swerved to the side, plunging into the bushes. Finally, with a desperate effort, Ichabod managed to get the horse back onto the road, and then the shadowy figure began to move. It moved out of the darkness and into the starlight, and Ichabod saw what it was. It was a horseman, a large, powerful horseman, mounted on a great black horse. Ichabod's blood ran cold. He could see the horseman's form clearly against the sky. He was gigantic, and he was carrying his head not on his shoulders, but in his lap, resting on the pommel of his saddle. Ichabod's terror was absolute. He turned Gunpowder around and began to gallop away, back in the direction he had come from. But the spectre was after him. The black horse was incredibly fast. Ichabod could hear its hooves thundering on the road behind him. He kicked Gunpowder frantically, his lanky legs flailing. Old Gunpowder, startled into a burst of speed, galloped for his life. They flew through the darkness, a frantic, desperate race. Ichabod looked back. The Headless Horseman was right behind him, his dark form looming over him. Ichabod remembered Brom Bones's story. The horseman had vanished at the church bridge. If he could just reach that bridge, he would be safe. He turned Gunpowder around again, heading back toward the church. He galloped on, the sound of the thundering hoofs behind him growing louder and louder. He reached the church. The bridge was just ahead. He could see it. Safety was just a few yards away. He kicked Gunpowder one last time. The old horse leaped onto the bridge, his hooves clattering on the wooden planks. He thundered across. He reached the other side. Ichabod looked back, expecting the spectre to vanish in a flash of fire, just as it had in Brom's story. But the horseman did not vanish. He reined in his horse at the edge of the bridge, and then he rose up in his stirrups, and he hurled his head at Ichabod. Ichabod saw it coming, a round, dark object, flying through the air. He tried to dodge, but it was too late. It struck him squarely in his own head. He was knocked from his horse and tumbled senseless into the dust of the road. Gunpowder, the black steed, and the goblin rider passed by like a whirlwind. And that was the last that was ever seen of Ichabod Crane in Sleepy Hollow. The next morning his horse, Gunpowder, was found wandering without his saddle, grazing peacefully by his master's gate. The people of the village went out to search for the missing schoolmaster. They found the tracks of his horse. They followed them to the bridge, and there, in the dust of the road, they found Ichabod's hat, and close beside it, a shattered pumpkin. They searched the brook, they searched the woods, but they could not find any trace of Ichabod's body. The good people of Sleepy Hollow talked about the matter for a long time. They shook their heads. They came to the conclusion that Ichabod Crane had been carried off by the Headless Horseman. The old Dutch wives, whenever his story was told, would always end it by saying that his ghost now haunted the old schoolhouse, singing melancholy tunes on quiet summer evenings. The mystery was never solved. But there was another story, a rumour that came down from New York City some years later. A farmer who had been in the city said that he had seen Ichabod Crane, that Ichabod had left the hollow in a hurry, partly from fear of the goblin and partly from shame at having been rejected by Katrina, that he had gone on to study law, had become a lawyer, then a politician, a justice of the £10 court, and had even been appointed a judge. And as for Brom Bones, not long after his rival's disappearance, he led the blooming Katrina to the altar. He was seen to look exceedingly knowing whenever the story of Ichabod was told, and always burst into a hearty laugh at the mention of the pumpkin. This led some to suspect that he knew more about the matter than he chose to tell. But the legend of the Headless Horseman lived on. It became the most famous story of this quiet, drowsy valley, a story that perfectly captures the feeling of the place, its beauty, its mystery, its love of a good, spooky tale told on a dark autumn night. And so our tour of Sleepy Hollow comes to a close. We have walked its quiet paths, from the time of the Weckquaesgeek to the time of the Dutch farmers. We have met its characters, the lanky schoolmaster and the brawny country hero. We have listened to its most famous legend. But now it is time to leave the hollow behind, time to let the story fade, like a dream upon waking. The image of the galloping horseman, let it soften. Let it become just a dark shape against a starry sky. The feeling of fear, let it dissolve. Replace it with the feeling of the cool autumn air, the scent of wood smoke, the sound of dry leaves skittering across the road. The story is over, but the feeling of the place remains. The drowsy, dreamy influence of the hollow. Let that feeling stay with you now, as you drift deeper and deeper into sleep. There is nothing to chase, nothing to run from. There is only peace, only quiet, only the gentle, steady rhythm of your own breathing. Let the quiet of the hollow be your own quiet. Let the stillness of the tapansy be your own stillness. Sleep now, sleep deeply, and may all your dreams be peaceful. Tonight we are leaving our world behind. We are going on a pilgrimage, not of the body but of the mind. We are travelling to a place of profound silence and staggering beauty, a city hidden by the cleverness of both nature and humankind. They called it Rachmu in the ancient tongue, but we know it by the name the Greeks gave it, Petra, the rock. It is a city carved not from quarried blocks but from the living sandstone cliffs of the desert, a city the colour of a fading sunset, a city that holds its secrets close. Our visit will not be in the heat of the day, with the sun glaring and the crowds moving through. No, we will visit this place as it deserves to be visited, by the soft, silver light of the moon. We will have the city all to ourselves, just you and I and the quiet spirits of those who came before. So close your eyes, if you haven't already. Feel the ground beneath you become the soft sand of the desert. Feel the air around you grow still and cool. Our journey has already begun. We find ourselves in the south of what is now the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan. We are in a wide, open valley, flanked by rugged, imposing mountains. This place is called Wadi Musa, the Valley of Moses. Legend says it is here that Moses struck a rock and brought forth water for his thirsty people, a fitting preamble for a journey to a city built by the masters of water. The sun has just set. It has not simply disappeared, but has performed a final, glorious act of theatre. The sky above the mountains to the west is a breathtaking tapestry of colour deep crimson, vibrant orange, soft rose, and the palest violet, but these colours are fading fast. The deep, velvet blue of twilight is rising from the east, bringing with it the first, shy stars. The air, which a few hours ago was heavy with the heat of the day, is now cooling rapidly. You can feel a gentle chill on your skin, a welcome relief. The air is clean and dry. It smells of dust of stone and of a faint, spicy scent from the desert herbs that cling to life in this arid land. There is a silence here, silence so profound it feels like a presence. The sounds of the modern world, the hum of traffic, the chime of notifications, they are all gone, left far behind. Here, the silence is broken only by the faintest whisper of a breeze and the soft crunch of our own imaginary footsteps on the sandy ground. This quiet is essential. It is the key that will unlock the city for us. Petra does not shout its existence. It whispers. You must be still to hear it. Before us, the wall of mountains seems impenetrable, a solid, dark mass against the deepening twilight. It looks like the end of the world, but we know that it is not the end. It is the beginning, for hidden within that wall of rock is a secret entrance, a crack, a wound in the stone that will be our guide. This entrance is called the Sick. It is a narrow, winding canyon, carved not by human hands, but by the patient, persistent power of water over millions of years. It is the only true entrance for the hidden city of Petra. We approach its mouth. The opening is dark, almost menacing. It is as if the mountain is daring us to enter. We pause for a moment, letting our eyes adjust to the growing darkness. The moon, now, is beginning to rise, a perfect silver crescent. Its light is still weak, but it is enough. We take a breath of the cool, desert air and we step forward. We enter the Sick. The change is immediate. The vast, open expanse of the valley is gone. We are now enclosed. The walls of the canyon rise up on either side of us, sheer and smooth and impossibly high. They seem to reach for the very sky. Looking up, we can no longer see the wide expanse of the heavens, but only a thin, winding ribbon of dark blue, dotted with a few captured stars. The temperature drops another few degrees. The air in here is cool and still. The silence deepens. Our footsteps, which were soft on the sand outside, now create a gentle, shuffling echo on the worn stone floor of the canyon. The floor beneath our feet is not entirely natural. Here and there, we can see the remains of paving stones, laid down 2,000 years ago by the people who built the city, the Nabateans. They were remarkable people, nomadic traders who grew wealthy and powerful by controlling the trade routes that passed through this desert. They carried frankincense, myrrh, spices and silk, and here, in this hidden valley, they built their magnificent capital. As we walk, our hands instinctively reach out to touch the walls of the Sick. The stone is cool and surprisingly smooth. It feels ancient. It feels alive. The walls are not a uniform colour. Even in the faint light, we can see that they are a swelling tapestry of reds, pinks, oranges, and yellows. These are the famous colours of Petra's sandstone, created by different minerals laid down in the rock over eons. It is like walking through a frozen sunset. The Sick does not follow a straight path. It twists and turns, a geological serpent. With every turn, a new vista of sculpted rock reveals itself. The walls are not just flat surfaces. The wind and water have carved them into fantastic shapes. Some look like sleeping animals, others like melting wax. The Nabateans, too, have left their mark. Look closely at the base of the wall on your left. Can you see it? A channel carved carefully into the stone. It runs the length of the Sick, and on the other side, another one. These are the aqueducts that brought water into the heart of the city. In a land where water is the most precious of all commodities, the Nabateans were masters of hydraulic engineering. Imagine the sound that once filled this canyon. Not just the echo of footsteps and voices, but the constant, musical gurgling of fresh, life-giving water flowing in these stone veins. Tonight, the channels are dry, but their presence reminds us that this was not a dead place. It was a thriving, bustling metropolis. We walk on, deeper into the earth's embrace. The moonlight is growing stronger now, casting long, dramatic shadows. The ribbon of sky above us seems to glow. The turns in the Sick are sharp. We can never see more than a few dozen yards ahead. This was a defensive master stroke. No invading army could ever charge through this narrow, winding passage. They would be forced into a single file, vulnerable to ambush from above. Here and there, the Nabateans carved small niches into the walls. In these niches, they would place statues of their gods or sacred stones called betiles. They were reminders to all who entered that they were walking on holy ground. We can see the empty spaces now, small, dark rectangles in the stone. The statues are long gone, but a sense of sanctity remains. The walk is a meditation. Left foot, right foot, the shuffle of our steps, the cool air on our face, the towering, silent walls beside us, the sliver of starlight above us. We are being prepared. The sick is not just a passageway, it is an initiation. It strips away the outside world, focuses the mind, and builds a sense of profound anticipation. What lies at the end of this journey? What secrets are hidden in the heart of this rock? The canyon makes another sharp turn. The walls seem to press in closer, the darkness deepening for a moment. We can feel the rock on either side of us, immense and ancient. We are in the very heart of the mountain. And then we see it. At first, it is just a sliver of light, framed by the dark, curving walls of the sick ahead of us. It is not the blue-black of the night sky. It is something else, a soft, rosy glow. We walk forward, our pace quickening slightly. The sliver of light grows larger, wider. It begins to take on a shape, the shape of something architectural. We can make out the form of a column or pediment, something vast and ornate. It is a moment of pure theatrical genius, orchestrated by the Nabateans themselves. They designed this entrance to be as dramatic as possible, to awe and overwhelm the visitor. We take the final few steps. We emerge from the tight, dark embrace of the sick and we step out into a more open space. And we stop, and we breathe. Before us, bathed in the cool, ethereal light of the moon, stands one of the most magnificent structures ever conceived by the human mind. Al-Karsneh, the treasury. It is not a building that stands on the ground. It is a building that has been released from the cliff face itself, a two-story facade of breathtaking complexity and beauty, carved directly out of the solid, rose-red sandstone. For a long moment, we can do nothing but stare. The scale of it is immense. The artistry is sublime. The moonlight softens every edge, making it look less like stone and more like a dream. The colour is what first captures the imagination. The famous rose-red sandstone is not just one colour. In the moonlight it shifts and changes. It is pale silver where the light strikes it directly. It is a soft, dusty rose in the half-light. It is a deep, velvety purple in the shadows. The entire facade seems to pulse with a gentle, inner light. We take a few steps forward, our eyes tracing its incredible details. The design is a fascinating blend of cultures, a testament to the Nabateans' position at the crossroads of the ancient world. The columns are in the classical Corinthian style, learned from the Greeks and Romans. The figures carved between them are gods and goddesses from the Greek pantheon, mixed with Nabatean deities. We can see eagles, symbols of the Nabatean god Dashara. We can see Amazons, mythical warrior women. At the very top, in the centre of a broken pediment, is a large, solid stone urn. This urn is what gave the building its name, the treasury. For centuries, local Bedouin tribes believed that a pharaoh, or some ancient king, had hidden his vast treasure inside this stone urn. They would stand in space below and fire their rifles at it, hoping to break it open and release the gold and jewels within. We can still see the pockmarks, the bullet scars, on the surface of the urn. But the treasure was never there. The name is a romantic invention. Modern scholars believe this was not a treasury at all, but a mausoleum, the final, glorious resting place for one of the great Nabatean kings. It is a tomb fit for a god. We stand before it in the immense silence of the night. The crowds are gone. The sounds of the day are a distant memory. There is only the soft, silver moonlight, the cool desert air and this impossible, dreamlike facade glowing before us. It feels less like a work of architecture and more like a work of magic, as if some great magician had simply commanded the rock to reveal the beauty it held within. Imagine the day it was finished, the last of the scaffolding taken down, the final chip of stone swept away, the king for whom it was built, standing right where we are standing, looking upon his eternal home for the very first time. What did he feel? Pride? Awe? A sense of his own mortality, dwarfed by the timelessness of the stone? We can feel a whisper of that emotion now, a feeling of being small, a fleeting presence in a place of immense age and power. It is not a frightening feeling. It is a peaceful one, a feeling of being connected to something much, much larger than ourselves. Let us sit for a while, here in the sand before the treasury. Let us simply watch as the moon continues its slow journey across the sky. Watch how the light and shadows play across the carved facade, creating an ever-changing spectacle. There is no hurry. We have all the time in the world. The city has waited 2,000 years for our visit. It will wait a little longer. Let the image of this magnificent, moonlit tomb fill your mind. Let it be a symbol of peace, of beauty, and of the deep, quiet magic that lies hidden in the secret places of the earth. Let the silence of Petra become your own silence. Let the stillness of the stone become your own stillness. Breathe in and breathe out. Deep and deeper into a state of perfect rest. The treasury is only the beginning, the gateway. The city of Petra is vast, and our journey tonight has only just begun. When we are ready, we will move on past this glorious antechamber and into the city proper. But for now we rest, here at the feet of a sleeping king, in the heart of a city of stone. Let your mind drift, let your thoughts soften. Allow the gentle current of the story to carry you along. There is nowhere else you need to be, just here, in this quiet, magical place. The sick has delivered us to this marvel, and now the valley begins to open up. The path forward is wider. They call this area the Outer Sick. The towering cliffs still flank us, but they are further apart now, and on either side we begin to see the true purpose of this city. Look to your right and to your left. The cliff faces are not natural. They are honeycombed with dark, rectangular openings, dozens of them. They are tombs. This part of the city is known as the Street of Facades. It is a long, funerary avenue, lined with the resting places of the less royal, but still wealthy and important, citizens of Petra. Unlike the treasury, these tombs are less ornate. They are simpler, more austere, but they are no less impressive. They are carved in a more distinctly Nabatean style, drawing inspiration from the architecture of ancient Assyria and Mesopotamia. They have clean, geometric lines. Some have a feature called crow steps along the top, like a set of stairs ascending to the sky. Each dark opening is a doorway to eternity. We approach one. The stone is cool to the touch. The carving is precise. It is hard to imagine the labour involved. Men, hanging from ropes, chipping away at the cliff face with simple hand tools, for months, for years, to create this single facade. We are not going to enter any of the tombs tonight. They are empty now, their contents looted centuries ago, and they are places of the deepest darkness. Our journey is one of light of the soft, silver moonlight that illuminates the outer world. We are here to admire the city of the living, by walking through its city of the dead. We continue our walk. The street of facades is long. With every step, another tomb comes into view. Some are small, single-chamber affairs. Others are massive, with multiple stories. It is a silent, sown neighbourhood, its inhabitants long gone to dust. The sheer number of them is overwhelming. It tells us that this was a city obsessed with the afterlife, a city where people spent a great deal of their wealth preparing a home for their soul. As we walk, the valley continues to widen, and we see, on our left, something truly astonishing, something that seems completely out of place in this desert landscape. Carved directly out of the mountainside is a vast, semicircular bowl, a theatre. It is a Roman-style theatre, capable of seating thousands of people, but unlike the Colosseum in Rome, which was built from the ground up with stone and mortar, this theatre was hewn from the living rock. The Nabateans simply carved away everything that wasn't a seat. We climb a few of the steep stone rows. The seats are cool and worn smooth by time. We sit and we look out at the empty stage. The backdrop for the stage is one of the most incredible in the world, the royal tombs of Petra carved into the cliff face opposite. Imagine sitting here 2,000 years ago, watching a Greek tragedy or a Roman comedy, and as you watch, you are also gazing upon the magnificent, multi-storied tombs of the city's elite, a constant reminder of life, death, and the power of the people who ruled this city. Tonight, the theatre is silent, the actors are ghosts, the audience is justice. We sit and listen to the profound quiet. Perhaps, If we listen hard enough, we can hear the faint echo of applause, the whisper of a line of poetry, carried on the night breeze. From our vantage point in the theatre, we can see how the city is laid out. The narrow, winding paths of the sick and the street of facades have now given way to a wide, open valley. This was the city centre, the place where people lived, worked, and worshipped. We descend from the theatre and continue our journey. The path becomes a wide, paved street. This is the colonnaded street. In its heyday, it would have been lined on both sides with tall, marble columns, supporting a roofed portico. It was the commercial heart of Petra. The columns are mostly gone now, just stumps of their former glory, but we can still imagine it as it was, a bustling, shaded marketplace. The shops behind the columns would have been filled with the treasures of the ancient world, silk from China, spices from India, incense from southern Arabia. The air would have been thick with 100 different languages, as traders from all corners of the known world haggled over prices. Tonight, the street is empty. The shops are dark. The only currency traded here is silence. But the street itself, paved with large, durable stones, speaks of the city's wealth and its Roman-influenced civic planning. To our left, we see the ruins of a great temple complex. This is known as the Great Temple of Petra. It was a massive structure, with soaring columns and intricate carvings. It was a place of public worship, dedicated to the most important Nabatean gods. We can walk among its fallen columns, their huge, circular drums lying on the ground like giant stone beads. It is a playground for giants, frozen in time. Further down the street, on the right, is another, more intact temple. This is the Casa Albint, the Castle of the Daughter. It is one of the only freestanding buildings in Petra, built with stone blocks rather than carved from the rock. It was the main temple of the city, dedicated to the primary Nabatean deity, the Shara. It is a tall, imposing structure, a solid, dark cube against the night sky. We have moved from the city's sacred burial grounds to its commercial and religious heart. We are walking in the footsteps of merchants, priests, and kings. Let us pause for a moment on this colonnaded street. Let us think about the people who created this place, the Nabateans. They began as a tribe of nomads, wandering the deserts of Arabia. Their original wealth came from their control of the trade in frankincense and myrrh. These aromatic resins, used for incense and perfumes, were hugely valuable in the ancient world. The Nabateans knew the secret routes through the desert, the hidden wells and oases. They grew rich by guiding the caravans safely to their destinations. And they chose this hidden valley as the perfect place to build their capital. It was easily defended, and, most importantly, it had water. They were masters of conserving every precious drop. The channels in the Sick were just one part of a complex system of dams, cisterns, and conduits that kept the city supplied with water throughout the year. Their ingenuity, their wealth, and their exposure to different cultures from their trade all combined to create the unique, magnificent city that lies around us, a city that was, for a time, one of the great centres of the ancient world. But empires fade, trade routes shift. The Nabatean kingdom was eventually absorbed into the Roman Empire. The rise of sea trade bypassed the old caravan routes, and a series of devastating earthquakes in the 4th and 6th centuries AD crippled the city. People began to drift away. The great city of Petra was slowly abandoned, left to the wind, the sand, and the local Bedouin tribes. For more than 1,000 years, it was a ghost city. Its location was a secret, known only to the people who lived in the surrounding desert. It became a place of legend, a lost city. It wasn't until AC 1812 that a young Swiss explorer named Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, disguised as an Arab, tricked a local guide into leading him to the fabled lost city. He was the first European to see Petra in centuries. His journals and drawings reintroduced this forgotten wonder to the world. And now, we are here, sharing in that same sense of discovery, that same sense of awe, walking these silent streets, not as tourists, but as quiet pilgrims, paying our respects to the genius of a people and the slow, inevitable power of time. Our journey tonight is not yet over. There is one more great monument we must see, but it is not in the city centre. It is high above it. We must climb. At the end of the colonnaded street, a new path begins, a path that leads up into the mountains. It is a staircase of more than 800 steps, carved, like everything else here, directly out of the mountain's rock. This path leads to Ad Dare, the monastery. The climb is long and steep, but we will take it slowly, one step at a time. This is not a race. It is a procession, a slow meditative ascent. With each step, the city below us shrinks. The colonnaded street becomes a thin line. The great temple, a jumble of stones. We are rising above the world of commerce and daily life into a realm of solitude and contemplation. The path winds its way up the side of the mountain. It is a marvel of engineering in its own right. Sometimes it is a wide, open staircase. Sometimes it is a narrow defile, cutting through the rock. The air grows cooler, thinner. The only sound is our own breathing and the whisper of the wind. We pause on a landing to look back. The view is spectacular. The entire valley of Petra is spread out below us, a basin of shadows and soft, moonlit shapes, and beyond it the endless, rolling mountains of the Jordanian desert, stretching to the horizon, all under a vast, silent canopy of stars. It is a view that calms the soul, a view that puts everything in perspective. We turn and continue our climb. The steps are worn and uneven. We must watch our footing. This climb requires our full attention. It brings us into the present moment. We are not thinking about the past or the future. We are just here, on this step, and now this one. Finally, after what seems like a long but peaceful time, the path levels out. We emerge onto a wide, flat plateau high up on the mountain. And there it is. Adair. The monastery. If the treasury was beautiful and ornate, the monastery is powerful and immense. It is carved in a similar style to the treasury, with a great facade released from the cliff face, but it is much, much larger and simpler. Its lines are cleaner, bolder. It feels more primal, more elemental. It stands alone on this high plateau, facing the setting sun. Its sheer size is hard to comprehend. The doorway alone is taller than a house. It was likely not a monastery at all, but another great tomb, or a temple dedicated to the deified Nabatean king, Aboda's Eye. The name monastery comes from the fact that Christians may have used it for worship in the Byzantine era, as evidenced by the crosses carved into the inner walls. But tonight, it is a temple to silence. We walk across the wide, sandy plateau and stand at its base. We crane our necks to look up. It seems to go on forever, a sheer wall of golden stone, glowing in the moonlight. It is less decorated than the treasury, but that is the source of its power. Its beauty comes from its perfect proportions and its overwhelming scale. It is a statement of power, a defiance of the sky itself. Here, high above the sleeping city, the feeling of peace is absolute. The wind whispers past us, the only sound in a world of silent stone and distant stars. We have completed our pilgrimage. We have journeyed from the dark, narrow confines of the sick, through the city of the dead and the city of the living, and we have ascended to this high place of solitude and majesty. This is the final image we will take with us from Petra tonight, the image of this immense, silent structure, standing alone against the vastness of the desert night, a monument to human ambition, human ingenuity, and the enduring power of beauty. Let this image of strength and serenity be your companion as you drift now into a deeper level of sleep. You have made the journey. You have climbed the mountain. And now you have earned your rest. There is nothing more to see, nothing more to do. The tour is over. All that is left is to let go. To let the cool, desert air fill your lungs. To let the silence of the mountains fill your mind. To let the gentle, silver light of the moon lead you into your dreams. The story of Petra is a story of stone and time, a story of things that endure. Let that sense of permanence, of deep, quiet strength, be with you